When President Donald Trump signed an executive order to end federal funding for NPR and PBS last night, it wasn't without support. Liberal bias has been one of their biggest arguments against public funding for these entities, and it's not the first time this has happened. There's also debate over public media's purpose. Listen to Fred Rogers, yes, Mr. Rogers, testifying on the importance of public media in Congress in 1969.
I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health.
Mr. Rogers was giving that speech to Congress to continue to fund public media. So this debate has happened before, and it's a debate that Gordon learned a lot more about when he talked to local broadcasting folks today.
At Minnesota Public Radio in St. Paul, the headline of President Trump's latest executive order is scrolling across their building, announcing cuts to an organization that normally covers the news, now finds itself in the news.
Disappointed that it's under attack.
NPR President Dushan Drew says federal funding makes up about 5% of their budget, around $7 million a year.
So it's not nice to have kind of money, frankly.
Drew says losing all federal funding would drastically affect their ability to produce quality content and could potentially lead to layoffs.
We don't have a corporate jet we can sell. We don't have a lot of other things beyond the people.
Twin Cities Public Television declined an interview, but did release a statement saying they're closely reviewing the executive order to assess how it will impact their operation.
I'm not surprised.
Jane Kirtley is a media ethics and law professor at the U of M. She says the cuts will have a bigger impact on rural TV and radio stations that rely on federal funding to stay on the air.
It really depends from station to station whether the loss of the CPB funding is going to be catastrophic or not. It's going to have an impact everywhere.
We definitely hope not to lose any employees.
Rural stations like WTIP and Grand Marais have less access to large corporate sponsors and wealthy donors, so the cuts could be devastating.
There's nobody else covering the hospital board or the city meetings or the county meetings. And so without that, the community loses a lot.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the White House argues a lot has changed since the Corporation for Public Broadcasting was established in 1967. The American public now has more options when it comes to news and information, and the government should not have to subsidize news operations to keep them on the air.
It's this uneasy relationship between saying you want to be an independent media company and yet you want to take taxpayers' dollars. And I think a lot of people say, well, then that means that you have obligations.
The CEOs at NPR and PBS both released statements today saying they have plans to fight this executive order. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is also arguing that the president doesn't have the authority to remove this funding because they say it was approved by Congress.
So a similar line that we're hearing through a lot of these fights through executive order. We're hearing it about tariffs. We're hearing it about this. We're hearing it about immigration. What does the president have the right to do through executive order?
Yeah, and right now I talked to some of the decision makers at NPR and local, and they're saying basically they're kind of going to be operating with two different plans. The plan if these cuts actually do happen, and the plan if that they don't happen. So they're kind of trying to make sure everything is covered because they just really don't know what's going to happen with this funding.
All right, a beginning of another story to watch. Thank you so much, Gordon. We'll be right back.